A team of researchers just finished scanning every single stone at Stonehenge, down to the millimeter. But it wasn't the sheer size of the monument that left them stunned. It was a microscopic detail hidden in the rock that proves we have been fundamentally underestimating the people who built it. For over a century, we have told ourselves a simple story about this place: ancient people, brute force, and a lot of rope. But when artificial intelligence and 3D laser scanning were turned loose on this ancient site, that simple story fell apart. What they found hidden in the data explains why the builders did something that makes absolutely no sense, and it changes everything we thought we knew about Stonehenge. To understand why this discovery is so disruptive, you have to understand the impossible problem Stonehenge has always presented. It sits on Salisbury Plain in southern England, built in stages starting around 3000 BCE. The massive stone circle we recognize today went up around 2500 BCE. That makes it older than the completion of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built by people who, as far as we know, had no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no writing system. Yet somehow they moved stones weighing up to 25 tons. They shaped them with precision, and they arranged them in a circle with an accuracy that still impresses structural engineers today. The bigger stones, the sarsens, were dragged from a site about 15 miles away. That distance alone is a serious engineering puzzle. But the real head-scratcher is the smaller stones, known as the Bluestones. These weigh up to 4 tons each, and geological fingerprinting has traced them to the Preseli Hills in Wales. That is roughly 150 miles away. Someone decided it was worth moving multi-ton rocks across an entire country using nothing but human labor, wood, and raw determination. For decades, the accepted explanation was simple. Neolithic farming communities, driven by religious motivation, organized massive group efforts. They used antler picks, log rollers, and sheer manpower. That story held up reasonably well for a long time. But modern technology is starting to complicate things in a way nobody expected. In recent years, teams of archaeologists and engineers have used laser scanning, photogrammetry, and drone-based 3D mapping to build an incredibly detailed digital model of Stonehenge. This is where the AI angle actually comes in, and it is worth being precise about what that means. These 3D scans generate enormous amounts of data. Millions of data points, capturing every groove, crack, and tool mark on every stone. Sorting through that volume of information by eye would take a human researcher years. So teams started using machine learning software to help detect patterns across that data. Clusters of similar tool marks, subtle surface irregularities, repeated geometric relationships between stones, patterns that are extremely hard to catch just by walking around the site with a notebook. This computer-assisted pattern recognition isn't replacing archaeologists. It is a tool that helps human experts see things faster and more consistently. And what it has helped reveal about Stonehenge is genuinely strange. Let's start with the shaping of the stones. When you look closely at the sarsens, especially the lintels, the horizontal stones that once sat on top of the vertical ones, you notice something odd. These stones were carved with joints, specifically mortise and tenon joints and tongue and groove joints. This is a technique used in woodworking. That is remarkable on its own because it means the builders adapted a carpentry technique and applied it to stone, something you don't see at most other Neolithic monuments. But the digital surface scans revealed something even more shocking. These joints fit together with a precision of just a few millimeters across spans of meters. For people working with antler picks and stone tools, achieving that level of consistency across multiple stones without modern measuring instruments is nearly impossible to explain through simple trial and error. And here is a detail that rarely gets mentioned. The lintel stones weren't just placed flat. They were curved ever so slightly so that when you put them all together, they formed a smooth, continuous ring. The builders weren't just carving individual stones. They were thinking about the entire structure as one connected shape and adjusting each piece to fit the whole. That requires planning ahead, possibly even some form of measurement or templating system, something we don't typically associate with a culture we still often describe using the word primitive. Next, let's talk about sound, because this is one of the most fascinating and lesser-known areas of Stonehenge research. In 2020, a team from the University of Salford built a physical scale model of Stonehenge inside an acoustic chamber. They wanted to study how sound would have behaved within the complete stone circle. Their findings showed that the arrangement of stones would have created noticeable acoustic effects, including reverberation and sound reflection, that could make voices, chanting, or drumming sound deeply resonant inside the circle compared to outside it. This wasn't a claim about mystical properties. It was a study of basic acoustics, but it raises a real question. Did the builders notice this effect and design around it intentionally, or was it simply an accidental byproduct of arranging large stones in a circle? We genuinely don't know the answer, but the effect exists, and it has been demonstrated through careful acoustic modeling rather than guesswork. Then there is the astronomy. If you stand at the center of Stonehenge on the summer solstice, the sun rises in near-perfect alignment with the heel stone. The monument also appears to align with the winter solstice sunset, and researchers have long debated connections to lunar cycles, specifically the 18.6-year cycle where the moon's rising and setting points shift and return to their original position. Tracking a cycle like that requires sustained, careful observation over nearly 2 decades. That is not a one-off event you notice by accident. It requires a system of knowledge passed down across generations, watching the sky consistently and recording positions. For a culture without writing, maintaining and transmitting that kind of long-term astronomical knowledge is an extraordinary achievement. But here is where things get genuinely puzzling. This is one of the details that keeps coming up in serious academic discussion, not just speculative videos. When researchers compare the construction quality of Stonehenge's different building phases, something unusual shows up. The earliest major phase, the erection of the large sarsen circle around 2500 BCE, shows the highest level of precision. The joints are tightest, the shaping is most consistent, and the overall structure is the most technically impressive. Later modifications made over the following centuries generally show less precision. The stonework is cruder, the fit between stones less exact. This pattern runs opposite to what we usually expect from human technological development. Normally, skills improve over time as techniques get refined. At Stonehenge, the peak of technical skill appears near the beginning, with a gradual decline afterward. Maybe priorities changed. Maybe the original construction involved specialists who were later unavailable. All of these are reasonable explanations, but none of them are fully proven, and the pattern itself remains a real documented oddity in the archaeological record. The transport problem adds another layer to this mystery. Engineers and archaeologists have run physical and computer-based simulations trying to recreate how a 25-ton sarsen stone could realistically be transported using log rollers and rope pulled by dozens of people. What these models generally show is that transport was possible, but far from easy. Interestingly, close surface scans of the standing sarsens show very little evidence of the kind of scraping or impact damage you might expect from a rough, multi-mile drag across the landscape. This has led some researchers to suggest that the final shaping and carving of certain surfaces may have happened after the stones arrived at the site rather than before, protecting decorative or structurally important surfaces during the difficult transport phase. The Bluestones bring their own layer of mystery. Geological analysis has traced these stones to specific outcrops within the Preseli Hills in Wales. What's interesting is that the stones don't all come from one single convenient quarry. They come from multiple different locations scattered across that hill range. Whoever selected these stones didn't just grab whatever was closest. They traveled across a wider area, chose specific rock formations, and then organized the transport of those particular stones across 150 miles. Why go through that effort when suitable large stones existed much closer to Salisbury Plain? Some researchers propose the Bluestones may have already been part of an earlier meaningful monument in Wales, and were deliberately moved to carry forward that significance, essentially relocating a sacred site rather than starting from scratch. Others suggest the specific ringing quality of these stones when struck may have made them culturally valuable. Neither theory is proven, but both are grounded in real research. And then there is what is still underground. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing surveys have revealed that the monument we see is only a small, visible piece of a much larger complex. Researchers have identified buried pits, post holes, and other features extending across the surrounding fields, some forming patterns that suggest additional wooden or stone structures that no longer survive above ground. The settlement of Durrington Walls, located about 2 miles from Stonehenge, uncovered the remains of a large temporary settlement, likely used by the workers who built and maintained the site, complete with evidence of large-scale feasting. And then there is Woodhenge, a nearby monument built using large timber posts arranged in a similar circular pattern. Woodhenge shares some of the same solar alignments as Stonehenge, suggesting these two monuments may have been conceptually linked, possibly representing a symbolic pairing between the temporary nature of wood associated with the living and the permanence of stone associated with the dead. We tend to describe Neolithic Britain using words like primitive or simple, mostly because these communities lacked writing and metal tools. But when you look at what digital scanning and careful scientific analysis have actually revealed, mathematically consistent stone shaping, long-term astronomical tracking, deliberate acoustic properties, and coordinated transport of materials across enormous distances, the word primitive starts to feel less accurate. These were people capable of long-term planning, specialized skill, and large-scale social organization, even without the tools we usually associate with advanced civilization. That is really the core of what modern scanning technology has done for Stonehenge research. It hasn't handed us dramatic secret messages or proof of impossible ancient technology. What it has done is let researchers examine the monument with a level of detail and consistency that simply wasn't possible before. And in doing that, it has made the real mystery bigger, not smaller. Every new detail we uncover tends to raise new questions rather than settling old ones. We still don't know exactly how the largest stones were lifted into place without cranes. We still don't know precisely why the Bluestones traveled 150 miles when closer stone sources existed. We still don't fully understand why construction quality declined over time instead of improving. What we do know is that a community working with tools we'd consider basic by modern standards pulled off an engineering and organizational achievement that continues to challenge experts using laser scanners, drones, and computational analysis thousands of years later. That gap between their tools and their results is the real mystery here, and it doesn't need any exaggeration to be genuinely remarkable. If you had access to the world's most advanced scanning technology, what ancient site would you want to investigate next? Drop your honest take in the comments. If this kind of deep dive into real archaeological mysteries is something you want more of, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what we uncover next.